Hey everybody, welcome back to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com and here on my YouTube channel, and this is going to be part 2 of our StudioLive SX32 series of videos. This time we're going to really focus on the DAW control part of it. In this first video of the DAW control part, we're going to walk through all the controls. I'm going to give you some basic information, how to make sure it hooks up and connects with Studio One so you can get up and running with no fuss and no muss. Now, if you did not see the unboxing video of the StudioLive, click the link in the description box below. We did an unboxing, told you all about the things we're going to do with the StudioLive over the upcoming months here at Home Recording Made Easy. The first set of videos, as I said, are going to be dedicated to getting familiar with the StudioLive 32 SX and then how it functions with DAW control with Studio One version 6. Then we'll eventually move on to live recording and other types of things that the StudioLive can do. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, give me the old thumbs up. And if this is your first time here, I want you to go out to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com because we're talking about mixing, DAW control and mixing in these series of videos. I want to give you a free mixing course. It's right on the homepage. Can't miss it. It's my gift to you just for visiting HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to give you something else for free. So here we are with the StudioLive 32 SX. So in this video, as I said, I want to walk you through, you got it out of the box, and how do we get up and get running, and what are all these buttons and all this stuff does? Because you have to think of the StudioLive, it's called a StudioLive for a reason. It works in the studio as an audio interface and a recording device and a DAW controller, and then it also works really well as a live mixer out with gigs and in clubs with your bands and artists. So, and they function two different ways. Now you want to think about this kind of in two different ways. The way it functions as a live mixer is slightly to maybe considerably different than the way it functions as DAW control. Okay, so keep that in mind. We're only going to focus on DAW control for now. So now there are several versions of the StudioLive as I sit here and record this video. This is the 32 SX. They also make a version, I believe, called the SC. They also make a 64 channel version of, I believe, an SX and an SC. Check the website for current pricing and information. And oh, by the way, if you want a StudioLive for yourself or you're considering it, click the link in the description box below. That is my Sweetwater affiliate link, and I do appreciate it. I get a small kickback. Thank you so very much in advance for doing that. Oh, and full disclosure, before we jump into this, Sweetwater and PreSonus did send this to me for me to do this series of videos for you, but they don't get a chance to see the videos. They don't tell me what to say. I just do what I always do here. Uncle Dave tells you the truth about these products, whether they like it or not, and I just want you to know that up front. Okay, so check PreSonus.com for current pricing or current offerings of the StudioLive. You can go to Sweetwater and check out all the current pricing because some of the mixers have a couple of additional or less features depending on which model you get. Even though they look almost identical, it's not just the amount of faders that you get. Some of them have Bluetooth connectivity, some of them do not. Some of them have additional scribble strip LCD screens on them, some do not. So just keep that in mind. You can go to Sweetwater and check all that out. So what I want to do in this video is I first want to tell you how do we get set up. Now I have some notes here off on my other computer screen, so if I'm looking away from the camera, I apologize. I just want to make sure I get everything. And then we're going to walk through all of the buttons and how it works pertaining to DAW control mode. So first thing, you get it out of the box. You get it plugged in. It turns on, eureka. You think you open up Studio One and you hit the little DAW button mode right up here, and all of a sudden everything ought to snap to and it ought to control Studio One, right? Not quite. There is a couple of steps that you have to do beforehand. Now, again, you can read their instruction manual, which is fairly laid out okay, or you can just listen to Uncle Dave. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we come over up to the master control section here. You can hit the home button, and this is the home screen here on the touch screen up top here. The first thing we want to do is you plug it in with the USB cable into your computer, preferably not a powered hub, but actually into the computer if possible. And then you also want to plug in your Ethernet cable, your Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable or Cat 7 cable into your router. This has to be connected to a network in order to do DAW control. 2 plugs right on the front of the unit, really simple to do. Plug it in, you're ready to go. Once you do that, first thing you want to do is you want to download Universal Control app from PreSonus.com, and you want to make sure that Universal Control recognizes your StudioLive, which it will. You want to go through the Universal Control and you want to check for any firmware updates. So you open up Universal Control here. You want to click on File here. You want to check for any updates here with your Universal Control app. And then you also want to click on the StudioLive icon here, and then you're going to go again over to the gear icon here on the right hand side, and you want to check for firmware updates. See that button right here? You want to check that out and make sure you got the latest firmware before you even get started, because if you don't, you can have all kinds of problems depending on the version of Studio One that you are using. This happens to be Studio One version 6 Professional, but it will work with Studio One version 5 and version 4. I believe, or maybe it's just version 5. Check PreSonus.com for that information. So once you get all of that done, you're going to come up to this button here, right next to the encoder under the master control section called UCNet. And if you can't see the detail on the buttons because of the lighting, I've tried with the camera as best I can. I'll talk you through it. So the button right here, second from the right, UCNet. You're going to press that button. First thing you're going to see is this screen is split into two halves here. We have on the left side, you're going to see the version of Studio One, and you're going to see, if you plugged in your Cat5 cable, you want to see your computer down here. Here it is, Studio One right here, David's Mac Studio. You want to make sure that you choose your computer in the list. It'll tell you your IP address, so on and so forth. You can have a self-assigned IP address. You could do it manually or dynamic, okay? So you want to make sure your computer's chosen. The other thing you want to do, if you want the transport controls underneath here to do stop, start, play, record, out of the box, those only control the SD card, which we're going to talk about in later videos. If you want it to control Studio One, the transport in Studio One, and why wouldn't you? You need to switch it to software control. Okay, it doesn't come that way defaulted. At least this one did not. Okay, so computer, choose your computer. Make sure you're on software control. Once you do that, you can hit the home button. I have a Studio One session open here, and if I hit the green DAW button, DAW, everything snaps to, as you can see. Okay, so that means it's with Studio One. And if I were to scroll over here to my first track here, my kick track, you see as I select the tracks, it will go ahead and select them in Studio One, and the faders do work. So it is connected. It is that simple. I've done this multiple times and it works. Now, let's start walking through all the different buttons that are here. So we're going to start from the top here in the fat channel control section. We're going to work our way around the board in somewhat of a methodical way. And you're going to want to take some notes because the manual is not very clear on some of these things, and the board isn't labeled. As I said, this is a live mixer and a DAW controller, two separate things. The way you see these buttons labeled here on the front of the StudioLive is more for the live mixer part of it. A lot of these buttons and encoders act as double duty when it is in DAW mode, but on the 32SX, that's not labeled anywhere. So you got to know them. You got to kind of remember. I'm going to walk you through one at a time. If you have the 64 channel version of this board, above the fat channel, above these encoders, they'll have a second set of LCD screens, much like they do above the channels, and that will label things accordingly to tell you what the encoders do in DAW mode and what the buttons do in DAW mode. I don't know why they didn't do that on the 32, but that's probably part of the price increase from the 32 to the 64. As I said, there are certain versions of this mixer that have some or less features. That feature is missing here, but the buttons still act the same way and the knobs still act the same way. So we're going to select channel 1 here, which is our kick drum track. Okay, if we come down to our gain knob here, okay, and we're using, again, the StudioLive 32 as our audio interface as well, right? And Studio One preferences, you want to make sure that it recognizes your mixer. I'll show you how to do that. If you're somebody new to Studio One and you don't know, you're going to go to Studio One preferences. You're going to go to audio setup, and you want to make sure the StudioLive 32 is there, okay? Make sure that that's there before we get rolling. Okay, so the gain knob. And I opened up our inputs here. I've set up 3 manual inputs here. So we have inputs 1, 2, and 3. You can see that here, okay? So our gain knob, we turn this gain knob if we are selected on the channel. That gain knob, I'll put my cursor over it, controls the preamp gain. You can see that up here at the top in blue. See how I'm turning it up, the dBs? That controls the preamp gain. That is the preamp for the microphone or the instrument coming into the console. You could even see it over here on the input side where my cursor is. I'll try to click over here so you can see it there. Okay, see that? So it controls the input here and it controls the input here on the console. Okay, when I select the channel, it's going to control it there. There we go. That's what the input gain does. It does not control this little value underneath where it says fat channel. This is the input. This is the input gain. This is the preamp gain. This knob controls the preamp gain. The input gain, it does not control. I can't figure out a way to do it. That's something that they ought to fix. So if you already were importing audio into Studio One to say mix a song and you want to do the clip gain, you can do it from an encoder. I don't see any way to do that. Okay, that's what the gain knob does. On the selected channel, you'll see the pan knob next to it will actually control the panning on the kick drum track. You should see that on the screen. That does work the way you would expect it to work. The gate button, the gate encoder next to it doesn't do anything, but the button underneath it does. If you hold down that button and you select your track, you'll see that on the track, the monitor speaker turns on for input monitoring. See that? I'm holding down the button underneath the gate encoder, and whatever track I select, it'll turn on the input monitoring. So when you're going to record, you can hear it in your headphones. That's what that button does. Again, none of this is labeled on the StudioLive. This is why I'm using notes and talking you through it. The next one is the compression encoder. The encoder doesn't do anything, but the button, if you hold it down, and you need to hold it down, you can see it changes all the selects on the channel strip on the mixer here to red. And if I hit select, it is now going to arm the track as well. And if you have monitor to follow record in the Studio One preferences, it'll also turn on the monitor button as well. So you don't have to do it separately. You can just hit the record. And if you have monitor follow record selected in your preferences, that will do that. You could turn that on or off. Okay. So that's what that does. That is the compression button. The high frequency encoder, this button here in green, this will open up the channel editor for the selected track. So if I hit that, you'll see the channel editor opens. You can also open and close that with the user button right down here in green. So I'm not really sure. You can do it here or you can do it here. Not sure why that's like that, but that's what that does. The EQ gain are the pot here, not the button underneath, but this pot that will select the input channel, the input of the channel that is selected. So as I'm turning this, oops, wrong one, I'm sorry. You'll see it's going from input 1, input 2, input 3, right? So there's the input. Hopefully you'll see that in Studio One. So you turn that knob for the you select the channel and you turn that knob, it changes the input. We'll go back to the first track. The next knob, which is the frequency knob, that knob changes the output of the selected track. Right now, this track that I have selected is going to the drum bus, but I can turn it to the main, I can turn it to the bass bus, the acoustic guitar bus, what have you. That's how you change the output, okay? And then lastly, we have the Q knob. That will change the automation mode for the selected track. So if you look at the bottom of the kick track, it'll go from read, touch, latch, and write, and then you switch it all the way back and it's off. That is the encoders and the buttons. So across this fat channel, some of these you use the buttons, some of these you use the knobs. Again, on the version where you have the LCD strips above those encoders on the 64S, it will have LCD strips, which I'm told will tell you exactly what every one of those functions do in DAW mode. But on the 32, it doesn't. You got to remember it. Okay, so that is the Q knob. Okay, now if we have a plugin on a selected track here, if we hit this process button, which right now is on, oh, I got to open the plugin here. Let me open up this plugin. If I got the Pro EQ, for example, and I use the process button, that will turn the open plugin on the screen on and off. If I hit I believe it is user. Will that close it? Yes, user will close those windows. Okay, so you can do that with that process button. The load button, which is right down here, right under the user button, that will add an insert. It'll come up on the screen where you can pick an insert, not only with your mouse in Studio One on the screen, but also on the touchscreen. We're going to do a whole separate video on the touchscreen and getting all to the menus at another time, but just realize you can do that, and then you can hit user, and again, or just hit the home button. Oops, close the window, hit the home button, that will clear that. So that is the fat channel section of this thing. All these other buttons that I didn't talk about don't really do anything as of the recording of this video in DAW mode. Maybe in future updates it will. Oh, one other thing. I did forget that the phase flip, remember up here on the preamp here, the phase button will flip the polarity, and 48 volts does work as well. Okay. Again, it's on the input side. It is not on this once down here. So it only will do the preamp, the polarity, and the 48 volts. It doesn't do polarity here. You got to click that with your mouse. Okay. Just realize that they need to fix that. But anyway, nevertheless, okay, that's my first set of notes here. That's the fat channel section. Okay. The next section over here is the effects master section. These buttons right here. These are handy. Right underneath the screen to the left, we have 5 buttons here. Okay, so the first button says Effects A. That opens and closes the inspector in Studio One. Okay. Effects B, which says mute. That opens and closes the editor. See that? C opens and closes the console. And D opens and closes the browser, which is cool. Now, if you have the shift button enabled, which is right over here above the record button, you light that up blue. Now these buttons do something different. Effects A opens the scratch pad in Studio One. Hopefully you can see that. If not, trust me, it opens the scratch pad. B will open the tempo track. C will open the arranger track. And D will open the marker track. Okay, see that? And if you take off the shift button, now it's back to inspector, edit, console, browser. Pretty cool, right? The tap tempo, let me open up the console. The tap tempo will turn the click on and off, the metronome on and off. You can hopefully, well, maybe you can't see it, but it's at the bottom of the Studio One transport. It turns the click on and off. Trust me, if you can't see it, I got a lot of stuff going on the screen. I'll do the best I can when I edit this to show you everything, but that's what that does. Okay, so that is the, yeah, that's this little section here. The other thing I want to show you in this section here, oh, we'll get to that in a second. So no, we'll do it right now while I got it on my notes. All the way over here, towards the right hand side where it says solo, we have a solo clear button. So if I select, let's see, put a solo here, solo, 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 and I hit solo clear, it solo clears. Pretty self-explanatory. That's not too bad. Also, if we come all the way over here to the right hand side, or to the left hand side, excuse me, at the top we have our page, previous and next. This is banking. So as I move, it will bank over the tracks one at a time, okay? If I hold my shift key, or if I enable my shift key, it will bank one track at a time as opposed to a whole mixer worth of banks, right? Shift key, one track at a time. Without the shift key, it's a full bank over, okay? Hope that makes sense. Okay. Master control section right here, okay? Right here where the transport is. So the first thing is, if you hit the effects button, that is going to add an insert. It pops up that insert box, right? Just like if you did it, oh, what did I say? The load button, and you'll see the load button lights up. So it happens in a couple of different places. Okay, and it also does it on the touchscreen, which again, we will do that at a later time. We can close that just by hitting the home button. So you can do it at the effects button, or you can use the load button, however you want to do it. The store button is the save command inside of your DAW. So if I hit store, you'll see Studio One quickly saves. If I hit recall right next to it, that is the undo function. Then we have our transport keys under here. It acts regular, as you would expect. as long as you activate it in the touchscreen, as I showed you early in the video. However, you have back to zero, stop, play, record. Again, if you have the shift enabled and you hit play, it's going to fast forward the playhead in Studio One. It's like a fast forward. If the shift button is enabled and you hit back to zero, that's rewind. So rewind, you need to use shift for these two buttons. When you take shift off, it's just regular play. As you can see, meters and signal. Okay, and then you hit stop, record, just like you would expect it to be. Now, if you want a little more functionality over your transport, if you come up here to the live recording section just above the SD card slot and you hit under live recording the edit button, this is going to bring up a full transport on the whole transport control on the touch screen. So again, you could do everything here, but you have more functionality. You have the actual rewind the playhead, you have fast forward the playhead, back to zero, right? You can skip markers, stop, replay, record. You could turn the loop on and off. You can turn the click on and off, and you'll see the tap button lit up on the mixer when I did that. And if I do it here, it'll turn it off on the touch screen. You also have a digital display of what's going on in your session up here. You have the name of the session in this particular song, Going Down by the artist Barry Diger. And then we have the playhead, and we have it right now displaying in seconds. If I touch the seconds, I can switch it to bars and beats if you want to do that. Touchscreen is fairly responsive. Again, we'll do an entire video on the touchscreen later. We have the timing 4/4, the tempo here. We can jump from one marker to the other. So if you want more functionality other than just the basic soft button controls on the mixer, you can pull it up on the LCD screen. And if I just hit the home button, it will go home there. So that is the master control section. Let's just keep going down. Okay, so now if we walk over to the left side of the mixer, we already talked about the previous and next buttons for banking. Let's talk about the aux. We did the banks, right? We did the banking section. No, we're going to talk about the aux submaster section, our flex mixes. So in live mode, these act as flex mixes, monitor mixes, in-ears, that sort of thing. Again, we'll do that in a later video. But in DAW mode, these again serve double duty. And if you don't know, you don't know what they do. The first set of buttons, 1 through 8 that are in blue, those control the first 8 sends on every channel. The faders will snap too. So let me show you in Studio One what I set up here. This is kind of cool because it kind of mimics with a real console, the way it's kind of laid out, the way the sends are kind of laid out. So if you see on all these drum tracks here, I have 3 sends. Okay, I have my room reverb across as the first send on all of my channels. Whether I'm going to send all of my channels to that room or not will be controlled by the faders. I'll show you that in a second. My second effect is my plate reverb, and my third effect is my delay. So if I hit mix 1, you'll see all the faders change. And now if you take a look at my, where I'm mix 1, that means it's the first effect, which will be the room reverb. So as I move this up and down, you'll see the send level change on the room reverb, on channel 1, on channel 2, on channel 3. Regardless of what channel is selected here, it's going to change the sends for every channel. See that? Okay. If I go to mix 2, watch the faders snap again. Now I'm on the plate reverb for every channel. Okay. See how that works in Studio One? Okay. And then if I go to the third one, we have delay, same thing. Okay. Here's my delay sends for every one. If I go back to 1, you'll see all the faders snap. You can do up to 8 of them. Okay. The buttons 9 through 16 down here in this white or amber color, those control headphone mixes if you're using headphone mixes. Okay. To get out of this mode, you just hit user, main mix, the big main mix button, and that brings it back regular faders, tracks 1 to 32, and you'll see all the faders now move. Okay. So that is the mix select and this aux subgroup section. Now let's move over here to the bank section here, which is right in the center, these 3 buttons right here. Now this board is split up into 2 sections. You have 16 faders to the left of the master fader, and then you have another bank of 8. And you can use this mixer in a couple of different ways. You can, if none of these buttons in the center are lit up in the bank section, if none of these are selected, this is just channels 1 through 24. Like an analog desk. Channel 1 through channel 24, all the tracks are labeled on the scribble strips. However, if you hit the aux inputs, now this bank of 8 is controlled by these 3 buttons. The aux inserts are actually my effects channels, right? And if I come over here in Studio One and slide over, you'll see I have 3 reverbs, and these faders control the reverbs, right? If I hit DCAs, those are my 3 VCAs that I have next to it here. Those control the VCAs in your session. The Mix Effects Master button, that controls your buses. So you can either use these 3 buttons, and you can use the last bank of 8 faders to control your groups, your effects, or your VCAs. Or if nothing is selected, it snaps back 1 to 24. And then if you want to get to your buses, your effects, and your VCAs, like I have laid out in this section, you're just going to use your page button over. And now here is our buses right here, and our effects and our VCAs. So it's just a matter of workflow. Do you want those groups, VCAs, and effects on a bank of 8 right on the first layer? Or do you want to have channels 1 through 24 here and then use your page and your banking buttons to page over? It really doesn't matter. It's all a matter of workflow, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. And then the last section I want to show you in this video is this user function down here. Now this is really cool. These user keys here can be mapped to anything that you want for keyboard shortcuts, excuse me. So the things that you do mostly with the keyboard, your keyboard hotkeys, you could program them right here. So for example, I'm always switching between the tools, tool 1, the toolbar 1, 2, and 3, the arrow tool, the range tool, and the knife tool, right? So instead of clicking 1, 2, 3 on my keyboard or having to take my mouse and come over to the top and click, what do? I programmed it so number 1 is the arrow, number 2 is the range, number 3 is the knife tool, okay? 7 and 8 I used as, and I'm going to show you how to do this. Let me close the mixer. Let me get rid of the mixer here. 7 and 8 I used as zoom in and zoom out on my timeline. I can zoom in on my timeline, I can zoom out. That is typically the W key and the E key, E for Edward, on the keyboard, and I could do it right here from the StudioLive, so I don't have to grab my mouse and keyboard. Very cool. 4, 5, and 6 I left empty because I wanted to show you. So if you want to go ahead and you want to program these, how do you do that? That's a great question, Dave. So what you want to do is we're going to come over here to the home button here, and I believe you want to come over here to the system button or the system icon, and then over in the top right hand corner, if you can't see it on our camera, I apologize, it says user button assign, and then here are the 8 buttons, and you'll see button 1 is the toolbar, button 2 is the toolbar, button 3 is the third tool on the toolbar. Right now 4, 5, and 6 are empty. 7 is zoom in, 8 is zoom out. That's what I just showed you. If I wanted to program one, let's say I want to program button number 4, I come over here to number 4, I hit edit. Okay, and we have category and function. So the first thing you want to do with your encoder is choose your category. So let's say we wanted to add an audio track. I think you can do that. Let's see. They have so many things you can do. So they're in alphabetical order. So here it is, tracks. I'm going to touch track, and then I'm going to come over here, touch the functions section of this touchscreen, and you're going to say, okay, what do you want that thing to do? Let's see. What do we want it to do? Can we add an audio? Oh, here, add an audio track mono. So let's click that. So we have a track, audio track, then you hit save in the top right hand corner, and now that button is add an audio track. And if I come down here to the bottom of my screen and I hit button number 4, you can see right here it just added an audio track. So that's really cool. So again, you can program them, any 8 functions that you want. The things you touch the keyboard the most for is what you'd probably want to program there. You can program them to add markers. You can program to do anything. Anything you can program, a keyboard shortcut, you can program there right from the touchscreen. And again, we'll get a little deeper into the touchscreen as we kind of move forward here in this series of videos. Okay, so that is the basic overview. The rest of the stuff is pretty straightforward, right? You have all your tracks here. You have, let me open up our mixer again. You have your select track here. So if I'm over here on track 1, you'll see it selects the track. We have a solo, which we talked about. We have a mute, which we talked about. We have really nice motorized touch sensitive faders. Above that, we have a scribble strip. Pretty, you know, tells you the track, tells you the track number. It tells you what the automation mode is currently set out right now, and it's off. And it also gives you a little panning symbol so you can see where you're panned in the studio field. We have a little LED meter here as well. Pretty straightforward as you would expect. So that is our basic overview of all the different functions of the buttons here in DAW mode. If I missed anything and you have one of these mixers, please leave it below. I'd love to learn. Again, the manual isn't always quite clear. They got some of this stuff in there, but some of it is not in there. And who the hell wants to read the manual? So if you want to leave a comment below and teach us all about maybe some other functionality, that would be great. But that will get you up and running. And once you understand the muscle memory and you remember what the buttons do, or if you put little labels on them or write yourself a little cheat sheet, you can actually put it on this nice little shelf here where the iPad would typically sit, so you know what all the buttons do. You get to learn it pretty quick. I've been working with this maybe for about a day and a half before I'm shooting this video, learning what all the buttons do. And I've been doing some stuff in Studio One and some tests. And I will say that once you start moving around and you hit the buttons a few times and you know what they do, it is pretty quick. You don't spend nearly as much time on the mouse and keyboard, which is great. But this is just an overview. And upcoming videos, we're going to do some actual mixing, some live demonstrations, so you can see how it kind of functions when you're mixing, to see when do you have to touch the mouse and keyboard, when do you not have to touch the mouse and keyboard. We're going to talk about the touchscreen. We're going to talk about plug-in control, both with Studio One plugins and with third-party plugins, and how you map them into the encoders. That is all coming up in future videos. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this startup guide, beginner's guide here, video number 1 here for DAW control. Again, make sure you like, share, subscribe. I want you to go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and get that free mixing course. It's right on the homepage. And by the way, if you're a Studio One user, all of the courses on my website, including that free one, are all done in Studio One. Most of them in version 5, many of them now being done in version 6, even though they're DAW neutral, meaning that any of my courses will be, all the tips, concepts, and techniques will apply to any DAW, but it is all done in Studio One. And if you're a Studio One user, I have specific training courses dedicated to Studio One version 6. I have a beginner's guide, I have a recording course, and a mixing course just for Studio One users, only using the tools that come with Studio One, nothing else to purchase, for beginners, people that are new to Studio One. So make sure you check all of that out at homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Once again, if you're interested in the StudioLive, click the link in the description box below. Go out and visit my good friends at Sweetwater to check that out. And again, I want to say thank you once again to Sweetwater and PreSonus for sending me this mixer. We're going to have a lot of fun here over the upcoming months, getting to know the StudioLive mixer for recording, for DAW mode, and everything in between. That's what we're going to do. So I want to thank you so very much for watching this video. I've been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Again, all the pertinent links will be in the description box below, and I will see you in the next StudioLive 32 SX video. Take care, everybody.